All right, guys, welcome to Brainstorm Inland. Today's it's really not that funny, but today we're actually going to sit down with Christian, one of our faculty members here. My name is Thomas Broyante. I'm the co-founder of Brainstorm Inland. This fine gentleman here is Riddell.
Hey guys,
Riddell's one of our students here.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what we
I'm a student.
He's a student.
This is Amrit.
My name is Amrit Owl.
Oh,
I'm a student/admin at Brainstorm Inland.
Nice.
Perfect. And today's esteemed guest is Christian Nacorda. Christian, I always say your last name wrong. I apologize in advance for messing it up.
No
Christian, welcome.
Nacorda, for the record.
Awesome.
And
you teach, what do you teach here?
I teach Figure 1 here at Brainstorm Inland. And it's a fun class.
Fun class? Fun like how?
Fun as in we have a lot of pizza. That is not true. We don't have any pizza. We bring... No, I'm going to stop lying. No, it's fun. We cover the basics of the human figure. So mostly it's like surface anatomy stuff within the context of the design. So the idea and the goal of the Figure 1 class is to get people comfortable with drawing the figure, understanding proportion, but understanding it in a way that would benefit them when designing characters and creatures.
Very cool. And you have a background in teaching. What's your background?
I've been teaching for, I don't even know how long it's been because I'm terrible at math, even though I'm Asian. Is that an inappropriate joke?
No, that's fine. We're all Asian.
Yeah. Upwards of 12 years I've been teaching. So, and teaching all around the place. So, but my background professionally is sculpting. I'm a sculptor by trade. Was a sculptor by trade.
Sculptor, like fine art sculpture? What kind of sculpture do you do?
We did a lot of production sculpture. We did production and...
Production for film, games, movie, what was it?
All of the above. And then also a lot of merchandising stuff. So we did everything from like merchandise for like the Simpsons, Family Guy, to like Halo, Uncharted, Bioshock. And then we did a lot of like pre-production stuff. So we were doing maquette works for animation studios. To like really, really weird stuff that I don't know if we should talk about that today. But
No, I'm curious now. Like you got me curious.
We did, and I don't mean to offend anybody, but yeah, we did. This guy came in and he wanted to do these sculptures of like Jesus, and they were like, I want Jesus on a motorcycle and Jesus like rock climbing,
like buddy Jesus.
Yeah. So I thought it was all tongue in cheek, and I thought it was all fun. And then they had me on design, so I was doing all the sketches, and the whole time I'm like, hey. And he like loved it, and he came in. But what I didn't realize is that he was completely sincere about it. Like it was about like
Jesus action figure.
Yeah, like just really getting make kids feel good about Jesus, like he's their best friend. And I was like, oh, that was my intention as well.
Then you did the Simpsons toys.
Yeah, while we were doing the Simpsons toys. The first project was Shrek, and I know that like Shrek is super popular. Like there's like a ton of memes, but I never was a fan. Yeah, are they a sponsor?
No, we don't have a sponsor. We're not that big yet. No sponsorship.
Don't burn the bridges.
Yeah.
Shrek, if you want to sponsor us, we will take it.
Yeah, we can cut that out.
Yeah, but having said all that, like, how did you first get into like going to school for art? Your education path, like
that was weird. I was always into art my whole life. I didn't plan on it being a career choice. My father, super cliche, was an engineer. So I thought that was my path. I thought that's what I was going to do. And then I took a drafting class in high school and failed miserably. So then I was just convinced I was going to be homeless. But I think my junior year of high school, I was getting a bunch of contacts and a few teachers. I don't even know that they were teachers, counselors, whoever. I was getting recommendations and I was getting contacts from school. So yeah.
This wasn't just based on your own artwork, or how?
Yeah, like were you like accidentally like did you just join the art classes on a whim, or?
No, I was like super for sure active like with art stuff.
How early?
Like in school, like I was doing a lot of stuff for the school, doing design stuff and like even like posters, murals, and stuff. And I was like really active with my art teacher, Miss Killingsworth. Shout out. But yeah, it was cool. So I was always a thing that I did. but it was never like a choice to make. Like, I thought it was always something that I was going to do on the side of like whatever my career was going to be. Looking back though, I can't imagine. I think like most of us can't imagine like what the plan B was going to be. So
yeah, like for me, it was also like generically like engineer, but I didn't really know anything about it, and so I just started gravitating away from it.
Yeah.
So
you all want to be engineers? Like a room full of engineers?
I started wanting to be a mechanical engineer.
Okay,
yeah.
I definitely did not want to be an engineer.
Yeah.
Didn't have the grades, didn't have the chops, didn't like it. So
Oh,
my path was a little bit different. But
Cool. Yeah. Let's see.
I mean, for like all of you guys, was it always art?
Kind of like, well, for me, it was I accidentally got put in the art class because our other elective got closed down, but then it came back, and so I just stuck it out in our classes, and then found myself learning more and more about this industry and stuff, and so now I'm here.
The same thing with me. Like, I got put into art in high school as a freshman, just to start off with, and then the sports kind of took over, but I still kind of did art on the side, and then I think college, I didn't like mechanical engineering, so I wanted to do something else, and like my family saw me drawing a lot, so it ended up going towards the art and started looking into some stuff, and then art became priority after that. Cool. Plus, it was enjoyable.
So what was like the turning point? What was the moment where you're like, okay, I'm committing now. Like, art is going to be what I do.
For me, it was like I had applied to colleges for. I know I said engineering, but I ended up applying to colleges for English. But then those accept
English.
Yeah,
Oh,
because I got a 5 on the AP test. But those letters of acceptance came in. But then I was like I just didn't reply to any of them. And because I had started to see all the stuff online, like construct.org and all those communities that would bubble up. And so that was when I knew. What about you, Amrit?
I think my turning point was realizing like I wasn't getting the grades, and like my mom pushing me kind of, and like told me to get my stuff done, and like so I got it done because I wanted to get more into art, and like realizing what like I could do in the art field. So, and then pretty much after that, like that was pretty much my turning point.
Are we?
So actually, I want to know. Same question to you. So,
Well, I think it was when I was getting all of those calls from schools, and then I was shopping around, looking at a bunch of different schools we were looking at. Like, can I say the names of the schools? Yeah, like I was as a student, I was looking at like Otis, I was looking at like Academy, Art Center, and stuff. And then it was like the idea of it being real. I was coming to terms with that, so. It was really exciting too, to actually do something that I love. I know there's a lot of people, like I've met a lot of really talented people that don't want to follow their career, whether it's like music or art or something, because they don't want to turn the thing that they love into a job.
Yeah.
That never
occurred to you.
To me, I was like, fuck yes, I want to do that. That sounds awesome.
Now, when you started working, did you ever get into a point where you were like,
yeah,
okay,
yeah,
so
for sure.
You did cross that.
Especially with the sculpting stuff. I've like always been a toy collector, so I just love like the preciousness of like a miniature something. So to get into the industry and like having it being such a beloved part of my life, and then realizing it's just like any other industry, it's like super cutthroat. People are crazy. It kind of shined like a darker light on it that I wasn't aware of, and it also made me not like certain franchises, which I have come like to love again. But
was it just the monotonous of working on it? What was it
was just like I got so sick of Homer Simpson's face. And I grew up on The Simpsons. I was raised on The Simpsons, so it was a little heartbreaking. But now I can look back, I can watch an episode and still laugh and love it. There were things. Probably it's too soon to talk about that, but there were projects where I'm like. It was just so much stuff. There were too many changes, which is like in the contract. But like when you're working on a project and they haven't even finalized the character yet, and you finish the sculpture and you have to go back and make changes, it's kind of a nightmare. you know.
I think it speaks to production all the way around.
Yeah.
You know, from like a lot of my friends or colleagues that are working in production, and,
Yeah.
and I hear tales of people that are working on like Greek mythology games, for multitudes of years, and they're like, I don't want to touch anything Greek mythology after that. And they were a huge fan of that, but then they maybe stray away from that. So that's not uncommon.
And that's just like the reality of like working on something for so long.
Yeah.
That's right.
All right, so you worked through that, obviously, getting through, working on those projects. And then at what point in time did you transition into education? Like, how did that even come about? So you went from like production school student, production artist, and then into education. How did that work?
I was working at the toy company. I was only 2 years into school, so I was juggling school and working there. And then they the directors at the school hit me up like when I was getting close to graduation, and they asked me if I was interested in teaching, and it was really funny to me.
So you got your first job while you were in school?
Yeah.
Okay. How did that happen?
I took a sculpting class, and the teacher that I had basically brought me in. He was like, "Hey, are you interested in working with us?" And I was like, "Yeah." There was more to that, but eventually I started working with him. It was a weird thing looking back. It was weird working and having him as a teacher. There was, I think, a conflict of interest, and I think I lost out in the end. At the time, I looked at it as a benefit, but there were times where like I was at work with him the whole night till like 11:30. I go home, I take the work home, I'm still working on it, but I have class with him at 7:30. I've been slaving over this project, and I hadn't worked on this homework. And like he would be like,
"So where's your homework?"
Yeah, he would just be like, "Don't tell anybody, but I'm giving you a B+." Like, even though I had nothing done. So like I kind of got through that class without learning anything. I got to work on stuff that was cool, but I didn't learn what I was supposed to from that class.
But that was a sculpting class?
That was a later class. I was doing modeling.
Okay.
It was cool that I was working there. It was fun, but I felt like being able to be a student and be working at the same time was a lot of fun. But I think there was a lot of things that I missed out. In hindsight, going back, I would have done things a little bit differently.
What would you have done?
Try to just make it work. I think I was a kid, man. Like, I was like 20. I was like 19, so I was still doing that. I was juggling school, work, and partying. So it was like I could have like just taken out the partying and like just really focused. In the end, I think, and it was weird too. I would have other teachers that would find out where I worked, and then they would just give me a pass on stuff. I had a teacher we would be doing critiques. It was like a storyboarding class or something. And he would just ream everybody. I remember he was reaming me. And then like, I think like week 4, he found out I worked at Atomic Monkey, and then it changed. And he was like, I never got reamed. And then he would be like, look at, this is bad. He was like, right, Christian, tell them. And I'm like, whoa. I'm like, dude, don't drag me into this. So like that, I didn't want people to know that I was working there.
That's crazy. I didn't think that happened in the art world. Like I know it happens in the sports world. You probably had some stuff like that when you were playing football, like a teacher that's coaching and teaching another class. And you hear about that all the time, but you never hear about that with in the art world. So it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, it was weird.
But going back in time, like you said, if you could change anything, you filter out the party. That's like.
I think there was a lot of things. I think. There was, okay, and I'm just being like perfectly painfully honest. I think my biggest downfall as a student, like my mindset was really arrogant. I went into school with my best friend from high school, and we were both artists. So we were like roommates. We took all the same classes together. We were just together all the time, but I knew that my half-assed work was better than everybody's full-assed work. So it was, in my head, it was like, if I'm doing better than them, who cares? So I was doing a lot of half-assed work. In the end, I think I only cheated myself. You know what I mean? Like I wasn't working at my full potential.
There's a saying, like they say, you never want to be the best artist in the room because you're not like working hard enough.
Yeah.
Typically. So
I just didn't feel pushed. Like,
or even just the smartest person in the room because but it's really interesting.
In all honesty, I didn't work on like really improving as an artist, like really covet that idea until after school. That's when I was like, I made a big push to like.
What clicked?
I just enjoyed it again. Like it was fun again. I went back to drawing, went back to designing, got really into storytelling. This was all while I was still working at Atomic Monkey. So.
Did you get a lot of critique back in college? Like, on your work?
Yeah.
Push you, or did you just like kind of ignore the critique?
I've had like, we got a lot of critiques too, but and you know, like when you're young and you get critiqued, you don't know how to take it. A lot of people don't, but a lot of people do.
Well, I think it also too, and I mean I can address this, but I think it also has to deal with the school too that you attended. We're not going to like mention the name, but you know, I think when you're in a situation where there's a lot of really, really good designers around you, the level of competition.
Yeah.
So you typically, you know, step to the level of your competition. So being in that environment, you know, I've taken classes where you had taken classes too, so I kind of know what that feels like.
Yeah.
And so I think having like a great deal of competition is healthy and helpful. But like you said, your half-ass work is better than somebody's excuses for not turning in work. It demotivates you.
I mean, but it also like puts that mindset in me now, being a teacher, being on this side of the table. I know what I'm looking for because I remember, like everybody remembers those teachers that pushed you. You know, you don't remember the classes that you not only did bad in, but like that you didn't care about.
Yeah.
You know, why would you remember that stuff? You either remember a teacher that you hated or you remember a teacher that you loved, and hopefully you remember the teachers that you love. But like the teachers that I loved the most were not like the art teachers. My literature teacher, she was awesome. I took a class with this teacher, and it was a composition class, but it was the whole thing was like not about composition. It was like question everything, believe nothing. We like studied Noam Chomsky. We talked about philosophy, and it was, I loved it. I like absolutely loved it because it made me look at everything critically in a way that really worked.
Now, what have you taken from that experience and put into your own teaching style?
The way that I teach, and you know, I don't think there's a teaching style that works for every student. You know what I mean? I think different students will react to different teaching styles. But for me, I feel like I find that students are most productive when they want to do the work. When it's fun. Yeah, if you can make it enjoyable for them, and if you can make them passionate about it, then I think you get the best work out of people. I think and again, like there's a lot of people that might be watching this that will completely disagree, because some people react well to like a militant teacher. You know what I mean? Like they react well to fear. And that's fair. You know what I mean? But I think with the content that I'm teaching, that doesn't necessarily work for that. I can see like in maybe an upper level or a design class when it gets really competitive, that's fine. But I'm still just trying to instill information into the students to get to that next class.
Yeah, and I agree with that, because like the scope of like figure drawing 1 is as sort of an introduction to a lot of things. So if you're harsh right out of the gate, then someone might get immediately turned off really quickly.
Cool. So like you ended up transitioning back into painting, or getting into painting, I should say, because of a teacher that you had?
So I was already sitting in on Steve Hampton's classes, and he was, I don't even remember what it was, but I think he either started running this painting class, and I was super interested, just because I already enjoy drawing. I hadn't really done that much painting. I mean, at least I never formally learned how to paint before that. And I remember I went in super confident, like, this is gonna be awesome. And then the first day I failed miserably. Like my likenesses were fine, but I couldn't mix the colors to save my life. We did like Jeff McCumber modeled, and like if I could find it, the skin is just bright yellow. His hair is maroon. Like I just
no, just uninstructed though. Like just
no,
paint something.
That was kind of instructed, and I just couldn't. I'm like, what is
like a class demo or like a
I wasn't teaching. I was
following along with.
Yeah, following along with. So it was like I just couldn't mix. So I think that pushed me to like get better fast, and then it just became this obsessive thing. I don't even think of myself as like this great painter, but like I learned a lot from it and was able to apply that.
How long would you say it took for you to like understand that, like getting your painting more better?
I don't even wouldn't say that I do now. I think I'm always learning. I wouldn't say I understand anything like fully. I'm always like in a flux of like improving. But I think to get comfortable with it, I would say like a couple years. But it was obsessive. Like it was just like to the point where it was almost like reflecting poorly on the classes I was teaching, because I just cared about getting better as a painter. So it was like I wake up, like literally roll out of bed and then just start like painting. I'm not even fully awake yet. and then I would paint all day until I would get tired, and then it's just like pump out portrait after portrait, and get comfortable with it, and then also like getting comfortable with it, and then like learning more, and then like it was just always like these levels. But
I think it's important to say, because a lot of artists think there's like a level that you reach, and it's like, oh, I'm just done. But I think over the years, I've never met a single artist, working professional or fine artist, that just is like, I'm done. This is it. I'm going to regress or never want to go further. So the student mentality never shifts. You never leave.
Yeah.
And so you're always learning and constantly learning. And I appreciate that. What are some of the stuff that you're learning now that's outside of like traditional painting and sculpting?
Stuff that I'm learning. I mean, it's just still the things that I'll typically struggle with. I'm like a character. Like I like the figure. I like portraits. I like people. I don't even do all that much creature stuff. I just like people.
Are you traditional painting, digitally painting?
Like right now, I'm mostly digital. I haven't done a traditional painting in like maybe 6 months.
Okay. And why that transition to digital?
Laziness, because I don't have to sit there and set up all the paint and like buy canvas and like refill paint.
What do you typically work in?
Right now, I just love Procreate. Again, because of laziness. Like I can like lay down on the couch and paint. I love it. But I just, it's also just quick to get those studies out.
Was it a learning curve going from a traditional to a digital?
Yeah. I think my mistake when I was first starting out with Photoshop was trying to just do what I was already doing and not utilizing Photoshop for what it was.
Okay.
So it was like, it was literally shading like I was shading with a pencil. I wasn't like using a big brush, and then like the idea of like textured brushes was beyond me at the beginning. It wasn't like just picking up little things here and there, watching other people watch tutorials, like watching other people's methods. Like I'm still like learning. Photoshop is such a big program. Any kind of digital medium like that is huge. So
there's so many different styles and ways of working with it.
I can say one thing I do appreciate about your work, because I've seen some of the digital stuff too, is that it still is rooted with a solid foundation in drawing or design, and so it never goes out the window.
No.
And so can you talk about like the importance of that? I know you're part of like our foundation teachers.
Yeah.
Here, but
I mean, I think it's all important. I think like, and we've seen examples of that. Like you can't just jump into advanced classes without taking the foundation stuff for obvious reasons. But like you have to start with the groundwork. And it's ridiculous. Like if you were drawing a face, you don't start with the detail of the eye, right? Like you want to build out. If you're eating a bag of chips,
a bag of chips.
Right? Do you
Never
start,
heard this one before.
Do you start with the chips or do you start with the crumbs? Start with the chips, unless you're a psychopath.
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, my jokes.
Just that one.
But yeah, it is important. And for me, I just took it upon myself to want to be able to draw well, to sculpt well, and to paint well. I think between the three, I know that I'm best at drawing. Between those three things, I know I can sculpt pretty well. But the thing that I enjoy the most is painting.
Okay.
But I think it's all important. Like you should know drawing well. You should understand line. You should understand value. You should understand painting because it helps you with color. You should understand sculpting because it helps you with form. Not that every artist has to be able to do those things, but it keeps you grounded.
And if you have the option to at least try it out for a little bit.
Yeah.
Cool.
Now, do you think that that's something that you're going to segue to, like in terms of like professionally? Because I know you're teaching. I mean, do you have any aspirations to go back into production, do any illustration work?
Or like teach a sculpting class.
Oh,
that'd be fun. That could be fun.
You can work this out.
I was already kind of talking to Jordan about that.
Very good.
Yeah, I that would be fun. I wouldn't mind doing like illustration work professionally. Again, like I come from a sculpting background, and like at this point, and for a long time now, it's just been teaching.
Yeah.
At multiple campuses. So if I was to get back into anything, I think there's passion there for me to want to do kind of illustration work. That's something that I can like do for a long period of time without losing interest. Like that, I think that's the funny thing is, like, even though I'm a sculptor by trade, I have a very short attention span with my own art. So if I don't finish something in like X amount of hours, I will completely lose interest. I think that's something everybody can like relate with. Just like losing interest in your own work. There's artists that can work like 90 hours on a painting, and I would never understand that.
Are you like a one-trick pony, or do you have multiple projects going on in terms of paintings? I know there's some people that commit to like one painting. I'm just going to get this thing to the level of polish or finish, or do you have multiple things going on at any given time?
Typically, historically, I like to juggle things and go back to other projects here and there. Like if I feel like I'm at a weird stopping point, or I just get tired of this, I can jump back to another project and then come back to that. But lately, I found myself like, if I don't get this done, I know I'll never come back to it. So I'll try to finish out a project and then start the next one. So
are there times where you get burnt out?
Yeah,
Like that?
Not so much burnt out, but I feel like I feel good about that, and I can kind of step away. But then it's just juggling life, you know. I think I get these questions from students like, how many hours a day should I be spending like drawing? I'm like, I don't know. That's weird. What am I supposed to say? 8 hours? Like
16 hours.
If you don't want to be doing it, you shouldn't be doing it. You know what I mean? Like if it's like 6 hours in and you're like, 2 more hours, like you're dumb. You're doing it wrong. So like in class we talked about this. I think we had a day where we talked about it. But like, what's your motivation? Not on like, not for like homework.
Keep that in. Okay.
What's going on out there?
Not for like homework.
But for like
if just to get you into a sketchbook or onto Photoshop or Procreate, and just to do your own thing, like what is your motivation?
I think for me it's just because I want to keep getting better, and because I know that to get better you have to keep practicing. Yeah. What about you, Emma?
I think what motivates me is like, I want to get better, and then seeing like other artists or even like the workshops that I attended like pushes me more. Like seeing the level that they're at is like, I want to get to that. Like I want to make something like that. So it's like I just got to work for it, you know.
Yeah.
So
mine's a little corny, but it's escapism. So like when I do that, like I literally just fall into a sketchbook or a drawing or a painting, and like hours go by.
Actually,
and it's cathartic. Like I feel really, really good.
Yeah, like I feel like I'm doing that like lately, because like if there's something I'm avoiding, I just start like doodling something out.
Yeah, well,
but it's both good and bad.
No, I think it's good, and I think that's part of the process, because that's when you're really truly enjoying yourself. That's not when you're clock watching. That's when you're like, holy shit, like it's 3:00 in the morning and I'm still going on this painting. And I think that there is something to that, you know, in terms of being an artist. And when I grew up, like we didn't have money in my household like at all. Like, you know, my grandmother would come home and she worked at like an engineering place, but like more of a factory worker. And she would come home with boxes of printer paper. And literally, I didn't have money for fancy toys. Like I would sit there and draw, and just draw and make up comics, skateboard magazines, and all kinds of things. And that was my escape. You know, that was me locking into my imagination and my world. And I know it sounds cliche and corny, but that's why I do this. I mean, I'm not trying to be, you know, a professional artist per se. I just do it because I love the process.
Yeah, I think that's like what all of you guys said. That's motivation for everybody. I think we all can relate to all of those things, whether that's improvement, escapism, improvement. Again, you know, I like when I was a kid, it was the same thing too. You know, but I think it was also that, and I think in any creative medium, people can relate to it. But it's just being able to like make something, even like being an artisan, like create something and like, I've accomplished this. Like I made this. Like this is something. I had a piece of paper and I had a pen, and now look at it. You know what I mean? To have like a collection of like dashes with a pen, and to make something that can bring an emotion out of another person is kind of powerful too.
Yeah, super powerful.
You know, so
you teach subject matters like anatomy, which is like, it's building blocks.
Yeah.
So how do you get that narrative into something not as dry but as academic as anatomy? Like how would you encourage people like with your classes? Do you have any projects that are based to help get that emotion in the story?
I mean,
what do you do?
I think like it's important to understand the figure, because like if your proportions are off or if the anatomy is a little off, people are going to notice that right away. Yeah. More importantly, if proportion is off, people will know. Okay. If your deltoid's like kind of weird, but the proportions of the arm are fine, people might not notice that. The normal person wouldn't notice that. But if like one arm is like too short, if the arms are too short, if the torso is too long, if legs are too short, people will notice that right away. Like people know what bad proportion is without,
even on like an invented character per se.
Yeah, they'll know. So if it's a creature, maybe that's part of the design, you know what I mean? But if it's supposed to be a human being and proportions are a little bit off, people will know right away. I'm not going to say any names, so let's just make up a name. Like, let's say there's this artist named Rob Liefeld, and people see that right away. He's a very successful person. I'm just kidding. But I think like the little things like that can go a long way. If you understand this stuff, then that's just one aspect that you won't have to worry about. You know what I mean? Like, I can invent these things. I don't have to worry about like people pointing out like weird things, like even just the basics of like an awkward pose, or a pose that doesn't pertain to the character that you're designing. Like if you're drawing Superman, you're not going to put him in like this kind of pose. If he's like, I've come to save the day, like oh shit, get the hell away from me.
Right.
Maybe, yeah. Right. So I think there's a lot to do with like body language, facial expressions, just simple like nonverbal communication that comes through with your design. And I think all of that's important, but that's still just a building block. It's just one other thing that you have to juggle when you're designing. So,
in terms of designing, because again, that's solid, information. But I think in your class, because I've witnessed it too, like you do find a way to like tie in like composition studies or theme it around a narrative. So you're learning the foundation stuff, but you incorporated a project that had to do with coming up with your own character, your own narrative. Can you elaborate a little bit more about what that entails in that first anatomy class or drawing class?
Because like in the end, like it's fun, but if all we're doing is like analyzing things, it can be a little dry. Especially compared to other classes where you have creative freedom. I've taught this class and I still teach this class in other places or at other schools where I don't have that creative component. And I just have to rely on people wanting to learn this stuff. But I think if we can take this and apply design to it, that can make it more interesting. So whether that's creating a character, like utilizing the process that we're using, finding the anatomy, finding the proportions of your figure, even putting it within context of your story, having a single image where you're doing like either a critical scene or like a keyframe of something to show content behind that. Because it's one thing to show a character in like a T-pose, but it's another thing to show them within context. You might have them in crazy lighting where I don't see anything, but that at least is creating a mood so I understand like what you're trying to tell.
But then to be able to do that, we have to go through, or we have to like kind of pay our dues and learn at least some of the gesture.
And I don't know if we should talk about this on camera, but I think this would be fun to do for a project, and I want to workshop this with you. But what if for like the big final creative project for Figure 1, we all create D&D characters? So I bring in sheets. Everybody, we're gonna roll for stats. Everybody has to pick like a class.
Let's do it.
And then we could have like a one-shot D&D campaign for like the last day.
That'd be fun.
And I think it's great as long as there's anatomy build up.
Yeah, of course.
So as long as it goes back, and if you do your character, you can do a nice rendering of it, but you have to show like anatomically the underlying structure of that. Yeah. I'm totally game with that. So, and I think it makes a fun project as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Cool. That'd be fun.
We're also going to do a D&D night here. That's something that we're going to do one of these days. We're going to get it off the ground because I've never rolled the 12-sided die. I want to try.
How about a 20?
Just a 20.
Yeah, I like that idea because like they kind of did a similar like creative project for some of the other classes, right?
Yeah, there's usually some sort of tie-in. So it is competencies-based education, but there's always a tie-in to some sort of like creative project. And some of the classes are heavily project-based, depending on like what level you are at or what level of class you are. Yeah. But once you knock those foundations out, then I think it's important. So doing that early on kind of gets you exposed to working on a project and seeing something all the way through in terms of like deadlines, and that's what we're here to do. And so I think that's important as well. I do want to not like shift focus or change focus because again, I think this is great. We can talk about the class all day long. I am actually very, very curious about struggles. We talk about like, becoming an artist, in your journey. We kind of went like, art school, you were the best one at your high school. You got into an art school, you're like, damn, you're hired, teach, and then you're sculpting and you're doing all this stuff while you're still in college. Not everybody's like that. So you had to have some sort of struggle, some sort of personal struggle, whether it's art related, whether you're like a compulsive drinker, like there's got to be something there.
No, yeah, always.
Yeah, so
always. I mean, I think that's it. Like nobody's ever the best. Like for somebody to like sit on the top of the pile and be like, I am done, I'm better than everybody. That's never the case. There's always mistakes. There's always regrets. You know what I mean?
So without getting too personal, like what are some of the regrets? Like what are some of those moments that you wish you could go back in the time machine and be like, damn, okay. Let's be real, because again, this is people are watching and
there's
they
a
need
first and last name. I'm just kidding. No, I think there was a lot of times, especially in school, and I mentioned earlier where I neglected certain aspects of it. At that point, I was really into the traditional medium, so sculpting and drawing, and I didn't care about 3D at the time. But I think in the end, in the long run, that screwed me because I didn't focus on that stuff. When the company that I worked for shut down, half of everybody got the golden handshake, ended up at like Disney, DreamWorks, Nickelodeon, and the other half of us didn't.
What was the basis of who got the golden handshake?
Who can do 3D and who couldn't.
Okay.
So like our shop was literally like broken up where there was like computer labs, and then there was like us. So there was like I had a sculpting desk, but we were doing sculpting, painting, molding, casting, like all the actual physical work.
Right.
I was the only one who would transition back and forth, but I didn't know the 3D stuff like everybody else did. So that was the thing. And in the end, like, I mean, I don't regret it anymore because it got me to where I am now. Yeah. You know what I mean? But like, I don't know.
Like if you could turn back time, you would have picked up the 3D stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. And that makes sense. Well, you guys are a sculpture house, and so
yeah,
that definitely makes sense. So I think it's important that you pick up where we left off in terms of talking about struggles, and your own struggles.
I think for me, it's like I reach a point where I'm like, I feel really good. And then it's something that kicks me back down. Yeah. You know what I mean? It brings you back down to reality. So whether that's seeing another artist's work, or thinking that you're capable of doing something, and then you realize like, oh, no, like I'm still not there yet. Yeah. I think that's always the struggle for me. But I think the thing is, and I practice what I preach. I always tell students, if you struggle at something, attack it. I have a lot of students that struggle with hands, and they just will conveniently do this.
Or in the pockets.
Yeah.
Classic strategy.
I'm like, why does your character have oven notes? But yeah, it's like you have to attack those things that you struggle with. And I know I say that when there are things that I'm not like a fan of doing. But I know that I have to attack those things. So.
Anybody else have any struggles they'd like to share? Like what is, doesn't have to be artistic, it'd be personal in terms of a developing artist or things that would get in the way.
For me, it's kind of, I'm kind of struggling with like what should we focus on as like people who are still as students, like in terms of like how should we go about thinking about what we want to focus on, like because you mainly focus on figures and characters, but like there's so many different things that we can pursue. Like how do we start thinking about deciding on something?
I mean, for me it was always like I just picked what I enjoy. Like what do you love doing most?
Well, for me I've been gravitating more towards architecture, but then I kind of see a lot of like Kim Jong-il's stuff, and then I'm like, oh, I want to try to do that.
Who? Never heard.
Well, who's that? But yeah, like so I feel like I'm starting to form something, but I'll still have days where I'm like, oh, but I haven't studied the forearms, and I need to study the forearms more, and I'm still hiding my hands, but then that kind of makes me feel like I'm like getting off of the path that I'm already like invested in, and so like
okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah. And so anything.
Well, I've heard artists talk about that before, where they're, professional environment artists, by trade. Yeah. And it's not an accident. It's because they like doing environments, and they're not like a character. Not that they're afraid of characters. They just don't necessarily want to do characters, and it's not something that they find enjoyment in. So sometimes they'll just drop a photo character in if it's a character in a scene. So I think it's just one of those things, like you really do have to enjoy it. There's one thing about addressing a deficiency, or an area of needs improvement. But if you don't enjoy it, that's problematic. Like, don't be a car designer if you hate designing cars. It doesn't make sense to do that. So I think that will help you to define your path. So within that skill set that you want to do, attack those areas that can make you better within that journey.
What would you say like to students? So let's just say like a student should a student learn everything like from the start to beginning, or should he choose or she choose from like what she likes doing and like gravitate to that like all the time, or should she or he learn like different things at a time.
Well, I think there's certain things that you have to learn, right? And those are the foundations, and you can't take away from that. Like we always, discuss that and we talk about that. You address it too when you're talking about doing your forms. There's forms in figurative drawing, there's forms in environments, and forms are important no matter what. Shapes are important. Good draftsmanship is important. Understanding value, light, color, those things are universal to whatever discipline that you go to. To that student that was looking to determine what they want to do, I think it would be good to take a class or explore multiple things until you find the thing that you like to do. Like you don't know if you like characters until you start designing characters and really understanding it. And the same thing with environments. Like if it feels forced at that point in time. And again, there's a difference between struggling with understanding the subject matter to like, I hate doing this. Like there's a difference. Like for me, in the technical side, like rigging was like that. Like I understand the need for rigging. I can appreciate a good rigger. Myself doing rigging was horrible. Like I forced myself into it, and I was probably the worst rigging student ever. I mean, I'd move something, pop off, and I didn't care. Yeah. I didn't care about it. I knew I wasn't going to ever touch rigging after a rigging class that I had to take. So for me, I'm not going to spend all my time trying to learn rigging. Now, I again feel like I still, as an artist that understands the use of 3D, I think the rigging component of it is important. There still has to be a basis of understanding, because if I'm going to design, whether sculpt a character or design a character that's going to move and animate, then I need to understand that process and how a rig would work. So I think, again, that students should learn a little bit of everything and then determine what the area of focus is, and then lock in.
Yeah,
we're launching a class, not to plug a class, but we're launching a class called Concept Art Bootcamp that does just that. It's giving you our student the ability to come in, learn about characters, learn about environments, learn about props. And I like that it's an early on class, and it can be even an intro class, because then a student can understand their trajectory. Because the problem in academia or education in general is it's too general.
Yeah.
And so the system of schools that I came from before, the problem with that was like they just threw everything under the sun at you. It's like, okay, you're an animation student, great, you should animate, storyboard, and do everything. And that's not how the world works. And that's not how the industry works. So I think there's a benefit to being in a system where you can specialize and kind of hone in on that area of interest.
I think that's the key of Brainstorm. And again, not to plug the school.
You can plug the school.
But I mean,
That's
that's
fine.
with the
We're here to plug.
like they're again talking about that old school system that we were a part of. I've taught Photoshop classes that were not specialized, so they were Photoshop, but it was for animation students, game art students, but also for graphic design students, for culinary students, for fashion students. They were all lumped in.
Photoshop for all those.
It was just like an
So
intro to Photoshop.
and for a lot of the students, especially animation and game art, that was the only Photoshop class we were going to get. So depending on who you got as a teacher, it's like if you're trying to make it profitable for the school, you're taking that away from the students, because they're not getting specialized Photoshop education like they should. So when I taught it for the game art students and for the animation students. I knew that I had Photoshop people, and I knew that I had graphic designers in there. I didn't care. Like I was like tablets every day. Like I don't want to hear a click of a mouse. I want to see tablets. Like I taught digital paint.
Now, on the flip side of that too, though, if you're a graphic design
I
student,
screwed
they're
them
like,
over.
who's this guy who teaches me animation stuff? So,
I know.
So I think the problem is the way that was structured in the first place. There shouldn't have been that, and so that was always an issue too.
To defend
And again,
myself,
this is also not our system of school.
Yeah.
This is a different system.
Like
of
here,
schools.
we're
Make
taking
sure everybody knows we're not talking about Brainstorm.
Yeah, we're not talking about this school. Like the reason why I did that is because that was the only class the animation and game art students were going to get. Those other students were going to have a multitude of other Photoshop
Right,
classes.
I get it.
So-
They wanted to focus on it, and I totally get that. So again, I'm not saying the problem was you did the best that you could in that system, within that system, to address the department that you taught with mainly or work with.
Also,
right.
being very selfish.
Yeah, no, it's not
Working so
selfish.
with my students,
I think it's just that, again, it's a systematic problem with that type of education. And again, that's why we are able to specialize and focus in on things.
Yes,
And so,
and that's like you can be very specific about what you want to get out of the school. And, I think, and that's like any industry, like you get.
so that was a very long roundabout way of answering your question.
Yeah.
Like Hollywood addresses. So absolutely. We were talking about the problem with schools. Well, and again, and it's not to knock all schools, because not all schools are out there. And I think
Because this was like a different time, like a different place.
Well, wasn't that long ago. And so there's still schools that exist in that kind of environment. But I think as a student, you need to be aware of it. And so I think a lot of people blindly go to a school. Sometimes it's path of least resistance. Sometimes it's accessibility. And I understand. But I also think it's very important for people to understand, I'm pro-education, 100%. Like, my sister, she has her PhD. She teaches in a 4-year institution in a graduate degree level. Like, trust me, very, very much pro-education. But I think there's something to be said about taking ownership and being able to customize that education to speak to your needs. And that's really your generation, where it's like the customization generation. I don't know if there's everything. You have to put your sticker on your gun that you're shooting up that game with. You have to address your avatar to look like you. Your freaking memes or emojis or whatever look like you. Everything's customized, and I think that should be the same in education. Like, you should be able to customize and pick those things out. But I don't think it should be a free-for-all either, because you can't say, I'm customizing my education, I'm just going to photo bash everything, but I don't understand how to do it wise.
You have a class where we just learn how to draw Apache helicopters.
Right. Yeah, so I think it's one of these things where there has to be some guidance, but you also have to know what you want. And I think if you do that, if you go into school, knowing that, like, you're not going to have an issue ever, because you know what you want.
Yeah. Okay. And then, because let's see, some of the structure here has helped me to like figure out a bit more of like what I want and what I'm weak at. But yeah, like even when I was trying to self-teach, there was like 10 different books that I would want to like go through, but then having so many things that I would have to customize through is like paralyzing. So,
I think that's the thing, like going back to like dwindling down to what it is that you want to do. Like, once you figure that out, then it's about finding your preferred method, like your technique that you're going to use. You know what I mean? Your process.
And I think process is so important, because what works for you isn't going to work for me.
Exactly.
And so knowing that a lot of people will tell you their way, they'll tell you their path, they'll tell you your process. You can emulate that 100% and still fail. You'll most likely fail. So you have to find what works for you. And that's why, like, I've done a lot of workshops. I've had a lot of artists come in over the years. I mean, a lot of workshops. And the one thing that I see is that everybody's got a different story. Everybody's got their own process and things that work. So you take all the things that are working to help you to improve, use those things, and throw out the shit that doesn't apply to you, or don't use what doesn't apply to you. And that's more like technique stuff. But again, I think it's very, very important foundation-wise. So from a student that's just getting ready to start studying, study foundation stuff. I know it's not the most sexy stuff in the world, but it's the stuff that'll give you the biggest gains in the work that you want to produce. Amber, we were talking about this earlier. You were talking about, you were a engineering student, and, you picked up and decided to go back into art, and it was that just like a fail safe? It was a plan B. Like, what drew you, and then what drives your method of study right now?
I think back then, like, first I was bad at math, and then a lot of mechanical engineering. Like, I just love working on cars. I didn't want to learn the education part of it, but like when it comes to like on hands and like you're doing it yourself, like that's what I love doing. And I think that's what art kind of is. Like, you're using your knowledge, your hands, you're just drawing all the time. But like mechanical engineering, you're learning. I guess in the beginning you're learning, but then at the same time, like with the process, like art is more of that than you're like on hands than you're dealing with, and more of like, I guess you could say there's an education side to art, like learning and everything, but I just like the on hands feeling of like, oh, I learned this, there's a workshop, like, oh shit, that's dope, and then like go back and you just do that process, and like that's kind of what I like. But I guess mechanical engineering is more of like really strict, I guess you could say. There's just too much math.
Yeah, just too much math.
Yeah, but I guess you're talking about like,
yeah, I was more concerned about like not the transition of like, hey, why you just jump ship from mechanical engineering to thinking, because I think we all hate math, and it's a weird major in the first place. But at the same time, I think for me, it's like, where did you start? I mean, I know you went to a school. I happen to know that you went to a school that had a little bit of structure. but now you're kind of on your own. That's over with. Like, where do you determine where you seek out knowledge? Like, what do you do?
I think how I seek out knowledge, like instructors, like what they give feedback to, or even like artists out there that are like very knowledgeable of their own art, like what made them stand out and made them more, how do you say that, like get a job in the industry, like they're very successful in what they do. And like I kind of look at that, and then like learning from that helps me out in a lot of ways. And then
so you seek inspiration per se from somebody who's a successful artist and look at those things. Okay. Yeah, makes sense. That's fair enough. Riddle?
What was the question?
I don't even know. I forgot. But no, it was about like, you know, you were asking the question about, to me, I think you posed the question, or Amber did, about like, hey, this girl that doesn't know where to begin, where do you go? And I like shamelessly plugged a class. But I think for yourself, it's a personal question. Like, so when you're sitting down to study something, like, how do you know what to attack? Where do you go?
For me, I've been trying to like practice more on like assessing where I'm at and what direction I want to go, because then that helps me like figure out what individual steps to take to get to that goal. But even then, even when I'm able to plot out stuff, I'll still have days where my brain just decides to go off-roading, and it's like, oh, let me download this tutorial, let me watch this YouTube video.
Well, let's talk about that self-assessment, because I think that's really important. So you ventured into that, and you said you do assessment. Like, how does that process work? What do you do in that self-assessment?
For me, it's like a lot of writing stuff down, and then even doing audio, video, like self recordings and journals, just to try to dump everything out so that I can look at it, or take a step back and look at it, and then once that's laid out, like, then I can kind of look to like a class or something and say, oh, this class kind of fits in where I'm missing something here. So,
and that's a very analytical approach. And I've seen your notes, you know, from stuff that you've done in class, and I think that's a very, very good approach. So what advice do you give the person that's not doing that approach? Because I think a lot of artists will do self-assessments and then they just get buried. And it's very intimidating when you're friends with a lot of really, really good artists and they're putting their work out on a regular basis. And then, you know, so how do you, in that assessment, not be discouraged?
I don't know.
Okay.
Let's see.
But that doesn't happen to you. So that's something in your makeup, I guess.
No, I still get discouraged. Like, I'll see people, like, there's some 18-year-olds at, like, Art Center who are, like, miles better than anywhere that I'm at already. And so but then it's kind of just accepting that I'm at where I'm at right now. And then that's why I kind of dissuade or distance myself from people who like outwardly like go, oh, that guy sucks, or oh, this guy is never gonna get good at drawing, because you never, like, one you never know how fast someone's gonna like get better. You know, maybe like a year or two will pass, they'll like blow right past you.
Yeah, I think it's just important for people to understand that, right? Like, you don't want to compare your level to other people that are out there. Your level is your level. And so it's got to be personal, you know, and as you improve, it's personal improvements and personal gains. And so I think that that's really important. So when you teach your classes, I know that you factor that in too. You look at like how a student's developing and how much did that student improve over the course of 10 weeks. And there's no letter grade here. I mean, we see it in the work quality, and I think that that's very, very important. So it's all those personal gains.
Yeah, and it has to be, again, I mentioned this before, but everybody's going to improve at different rates and different speeds. You know, the teacher's going to see that. And it's just because one person can illustrate better than the other person, that other person who doesn't illustrate as well probably had major gains from when they started the class. That's definitely taken into account. So,
but it always said, like, as much as time you put in is all the time that comes out of it.
Yeah.
So like
you get out of it what you put into it.
So. All right. So we were talking about I keep blanking on what we were talking about, but
it's okay. This is one job.
No.
No, I get it. And we were just talking about like assessment and personal assessment and art challenges, because I think it's one thing we can talk about, classroom knowledge all day long. But I think, what really helps me is hearing other people's, tales of how they deal with certain situations. And so every single workshop that I've done, every single classroom, every single person that I even outside of art, like I just want to know like what makes you tick, and like also, challenges. So I spend my time like watching a lot of documentaries, trying to learn about, people, even outside of art, just because I think that personal struggle and journey defines who they are, but we all have our own stories that we're telling or writing, I should say. So so like with that being said, like, how do you want to be remembered at the end of the day? Like what's your goal?
How do I want to be? All I'm here to do is facilitate people's aspirations. They want to get better. I want to help them do that.
So it's a life of service.
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess. I mean, that sounds very like RPG.
But it's not,
like I'm trying to be noble, but that really is it. Like I think to me, teaching is far more rewarding than industry work. It's one thing to put things out and then like I worked on that. That's cool. But I think the interactivity between the students, like that's inspiring to me when I see students like to have that moment where like I get it, or like to see them fall in love with things, or to see them like improve. Like that means a lot more to me.
Why?
I like people. Like I guess that's what it comes down to. To me, like sitting behind a desk and just slaving away at like whatever is cool. But then I don't know. The interactions with people is what I like. I have students from like over 10 years ago that I still talk to. Just connecting with people.
I share that with you too, and that's why I've been involved in education, because it's like I could work in different industries, and I have worked in different industries where I gave no shits about what I was doing. It was like representing a product or a service that I could care less about, and I couldn't believe in it. But with education, it's more about the relationships and building up that person. So I totally see that, and that is the only reason why you should want to teach. You don't teach to get rich. You don't teach to, to do that. But it's about instilling inspiration and legacies and stuff. So, and I don't know if you guys have found that yet. I don't know if that's something that you're even looking at. But it's I've seen both of you guys in action in terms of mentoring. I used to work at a tutoring center where we were at. He was a mentor on the other campus, and really good with some of the younger students coming in. And I see you do that all the time. Like you hover around to different circles. So maybe that's something that is in your guys' cards too, is education. Have you guys thought about that at all?
Maybe, but yeah, I still have like the feeling where I'm like, I still have so much to learn. Who am I to teach? And so maybe
it's you'll never ever have the answers or be 100% there. And that's the funny thing. It's like you have something to offer right now because you have knowledge that somebody else doesn't necessarily have, and you can pass that on. So I don't think there's any like, hey, I'm at this master level where I should be teaching. You can definitely work with people.
There have been situations where I was offered a class that I was not comfortable with. And, Steve, I'll say it. Steve was very encouraging of me teaching it. I'm like, I don't feel comfortable with that subject matter. I don't know enough. And he's like, that's why you should. You learn so much when you teach. I'm like, that's crazy. I don't want to do that while I'm teaching. I get that idea. When I started teaching when I was 22. I was really young. And I was terrified. But I think I've kept that mindset because going from being a student to a teacher was a very short amount of time. And I always kept myself like on the same side of the desk as the students. So like, I'm not detached from what the experience is for you guys. I remember what that was. I'm still a student. I'm still learning. I think there are definitely teachers out there that are detached.
Well, I saw some of the best students that I remember or recall, were students that worked and they tutored in particular subject matter. So if they were lackluster at life drawing, then they tutored or they ran the life drawing club and they spent all their energy and effort in there. And those were the students I saw with the biggest amount of gains. I actually know, a few people that work in the industry, and one of my friends, he would go through and do paintings and his personal paintings, he would actually talk through his process like he was doing a class demo or a workshop. And now he goes all over the world and does demos and workshops. And so I know he probably still practices that. So I think, disseminating information is a gift as well. It's an art form.
I think that's also to talk about like the profession of teaching. As an artist, there's a difference between an amazing artist being a teacher and an artist who is a good teacher. Because there have been countless, like, I would love to take this class, and I'm sitting in their class and I'm like,
yeah, no,
like,
absolutely.
There are people that can't articulate their process.
Yeah, and on the flip side of that, there's artists that are maybe not technically as good as some other artists out there, but they are really good teachers, and they have the good eye for it. And they, you don't have to be the best technical draftsman to be a good art director if you understand what makes a good image or solid foundations. And so I've seen that too as well.
As far as like improvement goes, I always tell people it's just putting in the mileage. You need to work to get better. You can't just cross your fingers and then wake up the next morning. But at the same time, like I tell students to not have expectations of especially like a 10-week class. But at the same time, there's that feeling that I know we've all had, like, you leave the class better than you came into that class that day. You're like, I learned something, I can apply this now. Yeah. Like, that's an awesome feeling, and I remember those teachers. I remember those days.
Expectation is real. Like, you can't come into this and just expect to be Jamie Jones or Craig Mullins in the top of the food chain with 2 classes under your belt. So I think when you talk, kind of circling back around self-assessment, you have to assess yourself, but don't be too hard on yourself, but also understand, like, areas of improvement. It's crazy. Like, I've done pieces before where, like, I thought it was good. I'm like, yay, posted this. And hey, it was really well received in my little social web or whatever. And then I go back to it like a year later and I'm like, this is so embarrassing, and delete.
Why'd you guys let me post this?
Or I go back and redraw and redesign it. So, and again, I think that just shows where everybody should be in their growth. You should be able to go back to your older work and be like, hey, I've seen some improvements there. A lot of times students don't do that, and I see them kind of getting stagnant. And I have a really, really good friend outside of, like, professional art world. He was a guy that would draw, and he had his one style, and that was it. And then he just never evolved it. And it just, over time, when 10 years ago, that was awesome. But if you're still doing that same thing and it's not really evolved or changed, it's time to revisit that.
But I think it also speaks to, like, good education as far as art goes, because there's people, and, like, there's nothing wrong with self-teaching, but if you're practicing bad habits and you get stuck into that mode, you're never going to improve. I've had students in the past that, like, they picked up the wrong things from classes, and they're like, what do you think? I'm like, the hips are too wide.
Yeah.
And it's like they just can't get out of that. Like, they just are, like, just furthering their bad habits. But that's with the right teacher, like, just directing you, guiding you to the right direction. Like, at least you can break those bad habits. You get more productive and you streamline your process. So.
Yeah, and not to plug the school even more, but I feel like that's what
I've been mad at you for plugging the school. I'm just kidding.
But, like, that's kind of the sort of, like, the course correction that I've been getting from Brainstorm. That's why I'm, like, super thankful that I get to, like, even just be here and take classes. So it's been really helpful.
We like you here too, and the thing is, it's not just about the teacher. See, and that's the thing. I think that's the misnomer. And when education or a brand of education is like this teacher and this is what it's about, that's not. When I first met James and John, or we sat down and talked about even bringing this branch out here to Brainstorm Inland, I was really struck by, like, even in their mission statement, it's about community and student focus, and that to me is vital because we're all students. Yes, you have a teacher, but that teacher is still learning. Do you know how many of my instructors take classes with other teachers because they want to learn? And that's the thing. It's like you never stop learning. And so, I think there doesn't have to be this hierarchy of, like, I sit up in the classroom and I judge you because you are a student. It shouldn't be like that, and it's not. What we do is we try to artists teaching artists, and that's what it really boils down to. And I think that's what I'm appreciative of this place.
To speak about talent, I mean, I think the problem with talent is, like, it's defined. The definition is subjective to the person or the individual. I've always looked at talent as, like, because I think a lot of us have gotten that before. Like, as a kid, like, oh, he's so talented. And I always thought of talent as something like an uneducated, like you're just good at something without, it comes natural. But then I remember like Conor McGregor was talking about talent. He talked about how he hates when people call him talented. Like, I worked hard to get to this place. I think as an artist, according to my definition of talent, talent only gets you so far. But if you're not going to nurture it, if you're not going to work at it, that means nothing.
I totally agree with you, but I think talent also ties into like who's looking at it. And that's where the subjective point comes out, right? Because I've seen colleagues of mine or parents, or people that I know that bring in like a student and say, hey, you have to see their work. They're so talented. Like they're just like an amazing. And then I see it, and I'm like, and I'm like biting my tongue. Like this is good, because again, I think the level of talent is different because I've had a bigger and broader exposure to like artists that I consider good or great based on my metrics of what I judge in a design or an artist versus the person who doesn't necessarily have formal training, that is just a consumer. That person has a different level. And that can be crippling to a certain effect if you're trying to work towards that, because you never know when you're good enough to appease that audience that you're trying to appease. I remember, I think it was Steven Silver actually said this at one of the workshops, and I'm not going to do my shitty Steven Silver impersonation, but he said this to me one time, and he was asking me about what I wanted to do. And at the time, it's like, I was setting up for a workshop kind of busy, and I was like, oh, children's book illustrator. He's like, well, how come you haven't done it? And I was like, I don't know, just haven't gotten around to it. It's like, well, it's bullshit. You don't need an excuse. And he basically told me that, like, I don't need to wait, I'm paraphrasing whatever, for, John Lasseter, who was the head of Disney at the time, to come tap me on the shoulder saying that I'm good enough to put out a children's book. And so I think it really depends on the scope of what you're trying to achieve. So, like, I know, my work isn't going to go work on some cinematic film level, right? But if I'm trying to produce content, for myself or for, myself, but there's going to be an audience for that. There's an audience for that. And I guess that's what I'm getting at. So you have to, one, know what you're trying to apply towards, and then also the scope of who your audience is. So, but, in terms of talent, I think it's hard work,
Does even when someone calls like you're talented, it's like, people like this exist.
The great equalizer.
Yeah. So it's like in the back of your mind, you're like, okay, but thank you, but no.
Yeah.
Now, on the flip side, too, there's really talented artists that are talented, but they've worked hard to get there. Yeah. But then they also lack something else. And I'll talk about this: social graces. Be able to have a conversation with somebody and not be socially awkward in those contexts. Because I know really, really good artists that have a hard time talking to people or functioning in a person-to-person situation, and that can be crippling, especially for a commercial designer.
That might hold someone's career back if they're like super good at drawing, but they can't have a conversation.
Yeah, I actually absolutely think that will hold somebody's career back, and that could be detrimental.
Interviews as well, because you can't hold a conversation or like go face to face, and how are you going to do it? It's true. It comes to a job when you draw so good.
So I think in terms of like, if you're trying to look at it, because we can look at this from many different eyes, right? And many different sides. But if you're trying to look at it from like a commercial design standpoint, you have to have those social graces, the ability to communicate and work as a team player. You have to be able to communicate your ideas, not just on paper, but be able to talk about it. Take criticism and feedback. That's a huge one. A lot of times people get offended, like it's a personal attack or critic. And then, have the ability to do the job. So those are the things, right? Like sometimes they see that's the least important thing, because anybody can be taught a technical skill, so to say, if you practice enough at it. Where I think that, those other items, to be coachable and to be an ideator, those are things that, you need to work on. And I think we all work on it. I mean, that's why we're doing this today. It's just to talk and address, some of the things that, artists should look out. I by no means have all the answers, but again, this is open feedback to what do you think makes the complete artist or whatnot. So I guess that's a good question for either of you guys. Outside of just art skills, is there any other things other than what I just mentioned, that you feel like an artist should be doing to help themselves?
I mean, I think that nails it on the head, like just being socially capable.
get out more.
It is a big part of it. If you're not a team player, if if you're going into a job place where everybody has to work together and you just aren't capable of doing it, that's going to be a detriment to you, because who the hell wants to work with a person like that? I don't care, like me personally, I don't care how talented this person is. If they're a dick, like I don't want to be a part of it. You know what I mean? So, but also on the flip side, we've known students that were not that good and were able to talk their way into jobs.
Yeah, no, that happens. It does happen quite a bit. So, I think it's a fine balance.
Yeah, and they're super cool, but in the end,
how did that happen?
Yeah.
I guess, I like that idea, because I do feel like there's like a balance to everything. Like we have to find our right balance as like people, and then I guess that's like what life's journey is supposed to take us through, I guess.
I don't want to say how much older I am, but I am older, and I don't like, hey, I'm old wise guy, but life's journey is important, and I'm glad that you said that, because it's crazy. What's important to me now is not what was important to me at 20 or 21, and it's crazy because we kind of see just like 3 feet in front of us, right? And that's what we tend to do, and you kind of live in the moment. Like, it was crazy. I remember being 18, 19, to like, I'm never going to see 22. I'm never going to make it to that level. Or to that age.
And you're like, boy, I'm already 24.
Yeah, again. Like, and now I'm like, I'd kill to be 24.
Yeah.
So I think it's your journey, and there's no timeline on it, right? Let's be real about this shit too. We're not lifting heavy boxes, and we're not doing a laborious job. Like, this is art and design. You could do this until you expire. So why not enjoy the journey, enjoy the process, and continue to get better?
I mean, there are, and not to change the subject, but like the industry that we're in, there are a lot of benefits, and there are things that the world has to deal with that we don't necessarily. At least I haven't witnessed. Like, I haven't ever been judged for my ethnicity. I've never been judged for like tattoos. Right. Like, that's never an issue. It has never been an issue for me. I've had people like that aren't artists, family members, or just people that I've met, and like, hey, was it hard getting jobs with your tattoos? And I'm like,
yeah. No,
what did you say to me? Like,
my boss said
tattoos. I know. What are you talking about? I've never felt discriminated against.
And that's an advantage of being in the art industry.
Because I think with artists, it's your ability, that's going to get you your job. It's your portfolio. And I think, again, bringing it all back to Brainstorm, I think that's like the magic of what happens here. It's because in the end, and not to knock on anybody that's watching this, and if you're going to like a 4-year school and you're really concerned about your grades, but that's not what's going to get you your job, unless you're trying to be a teacher, and even then, it's their portfolio that's going to speak for you. So
I had a student, we were doing a workshop one time, and I won't mention who it was, but there was an artist, and they were a pretty notable production designer, and they were talking about the industry and giving industry tips and tidbits, and she like asked her question, and she didn't know, but she's like, at what point in time do I have to show my degree? And like the room like kind of erupted in laughter. I felt bad. And then like he's like, never. He's like, you will never have to show that degree as long as you're going for this type of job, and he was very specific about it. We said it's an art job and it's portfolio driven. Then like, silence, and went to the next question. Her hand goes up again, and it's what about my transcripts, my official transcripts though? And he started laughing. The room just fell apart again laughing, and they were like, dude, you'll never have to show those, I promise you. And it was sad, but it's true. And so we are talking about something that's very much portfolio driven. We were talking about, I forgot what we were talking about now, because we segued into something else. So we were talking about
the degree, portfolio versus
degree and transcript doesn't
matter.
But
Absolutely, I shared the story.
Some people still, like, it's ingrained in them. Like,
not people, it's institutions. No, it's institutions. It's like, you want to go work for a firm? Where's that piece of paper? And when we cut, like I was talking about, there's people that I know that have master's degrees that are not good artists, and they're not great teachers, but they're in a place to run a position because they have that piece of paper. And it's because the governing body, the accreditation body, requires that type of degree. So they're just plugged in, placeholders almost to a certain extent, because they have that credential. Because within this industry, up until about 10 years ago, there was no master's degree in animation or game design. These are things that are relatively new in the scope of education, because it's a way to I don't know, validate in some sense, but I don't think you need it because that portfolio is really your validation.
Just to clarify, we're specifically talking about the art. Yeah. Like
correct.
The art industry.
Yeah, absolutely. So, education itself, you definitely need.
Right. Let's. Yeah. I don't want this to come off like.
Yeah. No, dude. I'm 100% pro education.
Yeah. We said this. Yeah.
Yeah. If you want to teach, you absolutely need the degree and credential. But I also think that there can be some streamlining in traditional academia that can look at who they're hiring. I went to a school, I'm not going to mention the school. This school was outfitted with a production studio's worth of equipment. They had 3D printers, they had great workstations, they had Cintiqs. It was a beautiful place. I'm talking about that place we went to. And they didn't even have anybody that could run that stuff. So they had technology budgets, they bought all this stuff, and they have, this class, and then the teacher's just teaching one little tiny iota or sliver of what they can do with the equipment and also what the industry entails. And that's a problem with the world that we live in because not everybody understands this business. How many times have you told somebody that you want to study concept art or illustration and what do they say?
Graphic designer.
You're a graphic designer? The owner of this building, because we lease, she referred to me somebody that hey, maybe you can hire or help him with his business. And I talked to him. He's looking for graphic designers. He's not looking for. So there's, again, that kind of goes back with knowing what you want and how you're going to get there. And just don't be. That's why community colleges exist. It's a commuter school. It's transitory. It's transition by nature. People go there to get a feel for different subject matters and then determine what it is they want to do. Because what you wanted to do at 18 years old typically isn't what you want to do at 26 or what you want to do at 46. It's again knowing what you need to get involved.
That's why I'm thankful for everything that we've said already, but also for the fact that I'm in a situation where I got to explore a bunch of different things and not have to pay a crap load of money for
Absolutely.
it. Okay.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because education cost is no joke, and that's why I have an issue with people going into high-priced schools right out of high school without even having a true understanding of their industry or what they want to do. Yeah. And the former school that I used to be with, they had that stigma, and truthfully, that was a problem because you'd have people come in and they're like, "I want to study animation." Well, and within animation, there's hundreds of jobs, within animation, from the production cycle to actually being an artist and involved. And it's you can't be that generic. So I think anytime a student's looking to explore school, if it's just overall general, be alarmed, and then do your due diligence and your homework to understand your industry. It kills me when I'm talking shop with artists that have been wanting to be a concept artist or illustrator for some time, and they don't know who the key players are, the big studios, and it's again, learn your industry from the inside out.
I've had students that were in the wrong program, clearly based on their talent, they were in the wrong program, they were in graphic design. And you see their work, and why didn't you sign up for animation? And I've had multiple people tell me, "Oh, I just can't do the same drawing of the character over and over again." I'm like, why the fuck do you think that you're going to be doing 2D animation?
Yeah.
What year is this? Why? That's not the only thing that comes out of animation.
Yeah, and I think there's good avenues for studying animation. Let's say they did want to do 2D animation. Well, they can study and focus on 2D animation and make that their thing.
But they're it's just a blanket statement. This is what animation is. It's only old school 2D animation, which is, there's nothing wrong. That's beautiful stuff. But I'm there's storyboarding. There's a bajillion things.
Bajillion.
Storyboarding and others.
And that's why, again, focusing on specializations are really, really important.
Because even in concept art, there's environments and characters and creatures.
Yeah. Props. Yeah, user interface. There's all kinds of stuff.
And that's not even touching on people who are even interested in 3D. It's then 3D as
Can we back up and go back to concept art? Yeah. Let's talk about illustration. Let's talk about toy illustration. Let's talk about marketing art. Let's talk about packaging design. There is avenues to do this and so many different places to explore. But that's what I'm saying about learn your industry and understand, okay, these are the areas that these things can be applied. And it's not just the one place, That's important. And so I think when people kind of go in and they're just I'm going to study everything, do that somewhere else where it's inexpensive, You guys do have, and when I say you guys, I'm saying all of you younger generation, you have computers and the internet and you have means of finding out more.
Yeah.
But I think at the same time, that's really scary too, because somebody had told me there's a term GTS, Google that shit. So like if you don't understand things, you don't have to retain things. You just Google that shit. And I think that's helpful, but I think it also takes away from people having to learn.
Yes. I think there was, like, Pete Holmes talked about this, comedian, shout out to Pete Holmes. But he was like, there was a time, and like, you guys don't know this, but there was a time where you just, if you didn't know something, you just didn't know. You know, like, I don't know how, you didn't even have means to find out about things. Like, his joke was like, where was, I just like pick someone. Where was Eddie Vedder born? Like, I just don't know. You couldn't just pull out your phone and look it up. You know?
No, if you wanted to prove somebody wrong, you had to run to a bookshelf or a library, pull out an encyclopedia, hope that shit was in there, flip through it. It'd probably take you the better part of 3 or 4 hours just to come back and burn them. Yeah. Now I'm getting molded by my 10-year-old who pulled his phone and like GTS something. I'm like, yep, Dad, you were wrong. And I'm like, thanks. You know, so I don't even try and bullshit in my house anymore because I know it's going to come back and get me. But at the same time, you can't do that with art though, because it's a physical activity. Like you were talking about that physical connection that you like with art.
Yeah, like you can't phone in a drawing.
Yeah, you can't do that with the gym either. Like I'm not in shape, but I mean, I can't just be like, yo, I went to the gym. And if I didn't go to the gym, and I told you guys I went to the gym for like 3 months, but you never saw anything, no progress off my body and my physical being, saying it doesn't mean it. And it's the same thing as an artist. You have to practice and apply it. Yeah.
With our current culture is like anti-intellectualism. But I just watched this thing. And I'll shout out to like another YouTube channel, to Wisecrack, but they were talking about how it's not necessarily anti-intellectualism, but pseudo-intellectualism. It's people who have access to this information and they're building their opinions on like maybe wrong information or false facts. So, and like, I'm not gonna say no offense, but like flat earthers, anti-vaxxers who like are like convinced that they're correct about these things when the science clearly proves that they're wrong. So it's not like it's not like we frown upon intellectualism, but I think we are misguided in people, or at least some people are misguided in
like that pseudo-intellectualism.
I didn't coin it again.
No, I get it, but that makes sense. And I think that actually goes into the art community as well, in the art world as well, because you have some artists that are maybe big on YouTube or different places, and they give shitty information out sometimes, you know, and somebody looking to study that can really build bad habits. And
thankfully since YouTube's still kind of like Wild West, they get called out fairly soon.
No, absolutely. By the community?
But there are a couple that I could think of already. It's like a couple that I've brought.
Can we talk about them and just bleep it?
No, not at all.
But they people get called out for their videos.
They do, but then also the internet, it kind of, and I'll probably get called out for this too, but I don't care. It also breeds like a not a false sense of security, but there's a lot of people that troll. They're very negative. They do that because of the platform and the forum, and sometimes people are just mean. Like they say mean shit, you know, and. So again, it's really hard because you look at those comment streams on one of those videos, and they get called out, but as long as it's constructive or there's in context, so I think that's what it is. But when you're like roasting them just with like a meme and saying like really horrible shit, and it becomes something that Jordan's sharing all over the place, then it becomes a problem. So I think there's a right way to do things, because I think cyberbullying is a real thing. Yeah, absolutely. And I think you can't knock it. Like again, like if anybody like went after a family member of mine for doing like a YouTube channel or something, like that's personal. It's not cool. So I think you can't fault somebody on that, but I think you need to make sure as you're learning from somebody who has the information relevant to teach you. And so sometimes experience is that, but it's also like their teaching prowess too. Like I would want to learn sculpting from Christian because he sculpts his ass off, and he's done it, and he did it for over 10 years almost, as a trait, and he's really good at it. And so for me, like that's valuable. And so when I'm seeking to learn from somebody, it's somebody who has that information and knowledge typically. So
I mean, we're at the point now where like YouTube's been around for a little while now, and yes, there are some people putting out bad information there, but I think like the better stuff is like starting to rise to the top, and you're seeing there are like amazing tutorials on YouTube.
Absolutely, and there's like people that are doing it right too, like like modern day James, again. killing it, in terms of like the information that he's getting out there. And I can think of, multitudes of like shows and things that I watch that, again, are really, really good information as well. Yeah. So I agree with that. But
it's just hard for like the normal person or somebody getting into it to navigate.
Somebody who's never set foot through the door, glimpsed through the window. Those are the ones that are easily confused.
I mean, and in the end, even the people that are like maybe they have a ton of subscribers, even if they're not putting out the best information, at least they're exposing people like that aren't familiar with the stuff to it, and maybe through them they can find better tutorials and better people.
Yeah, because that might be the entrance and the peak-in. Because I remember I had artists that I looked at too when I was drawing and stuff, and now I look back at their stuff and I'm like, why did I ever like that? Like what did I find appealing out of that? And so I have to be critical and kind of go back and look and say, okay, this is what I thought was appealing, but it also had to do at the level of where I was at, in terms of like skill set. And so, yeah, there's a lot to be said.
That's a scary thing. I mean, going back to like your interests as a younger person, even like, I don't know, you guys are young enough, but I remember they first put like Mighty Morphin Power Rangers on Netflix, and I was like, oh man. And I popped that on, and for like the first 5 minutes, I was like, I could go back in time and would smack the shit out of myself as a kid. Like, why did I like this? This is so terrible.
Well, I don't know. I still have good nostalgia goggles for the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movies from the 90s.
See, but some stuff holds up. I think some stuff holds up, and then some stuff doesn't. And then you quickly realize it as an adult. Like, there are things that I
But
love.
I think nostalgia goggles are the key word there, right?
I guess so. But even still, like, for that specific case, the fight choreography, the fact that they're, like, fighting in those, like, wacky scenes is, like, still really cool.
But I think there's also, like objectively, some things are good. Like, nobody's like, man, why did I like Back to the Future when I was a kid? Like, it's because it's good.
Yeah, it holds up.
Yeah, it holds up. So
they're going to probably remake it soon.
I watched that.
Jesus, remake it.
That's so good. So good. Yeah.
That's like why we look to like classic artists to be inspired by traditional, right? So it's funny. Like I have an instructor that I know. I think Steve Hampton said like most of the people he looks to is alive. Like why would he look to a dead person? And I like that, that mentality too. But at the same time, I see looking backwards at some of these artists because there is stuff that's timeless. There is stuff that holds up. Yeah, he did say that. And I think it was. And again, I don't know how serious it was because we were talking about masters. Okay. Yeah, no, after my PhD, like trust me, like. All respect to Steve, but in terms of like what we were talking about, there was a lot of like talk about the kitsch and like aesthetic, and it came up in that context. So I think it really has to do with understanding, art beyond just the physical piece that's being created, like the artists themselves and their idea of philosophy, and having access to that. When dealing with life.
I've had that couple of
right. So before. Looking at like dead artists though, like there's a lot of really, really good artists that were before us that came 200, 300 years ago.
It's also accessibility too, because there's still like, Steve is one of the most accomplished people and most intelligent people that I know, and he's only like 4 years older than me. Yeah. So it just makes
that shit is intimidating.
Yeah, right. Like that's going back to like, damn.
Yeah.
So is it tell?
He's got 2 bachelor's degrees, 2 master's degrees, and he's working on his doctorate right now.
Really?
That's crazy.
And that's intimidating too. It's my sister. My sister has her PhD.
That's just part of what like Steve does. It's crazy.
I joke about that because but at the same time he's accessible and he's like one of the most down to earth people that you'll meet. And so he disseminates information really, really well.
Yeah.
Steve's in there. So yeah. So in terms of moving forward, and I think I brought this up too. We all have goals. So let's just spend a little time talking about what our goals are.
I think I have a few goals, but like one of the main goals is to like be where I want to be for myself, like be happy, and then like be good at what I want to do. But
You're
like
one of the most happy people I know. Like on a regular basis. Like I'm in a bad mood, you put me in a good mood all the time. So you're already there.
Well, for
Check
some
that out
people,
there.
A happy person doesn't jump out from behind vending machines.
That's true. You don't scare people because you do have a sickness in scaring people. But okay.
But I don't know. Like there's some things that I want to reach. Like when I look at other artists, like I want to be there.
Yeah,
but like that's what I want to like be at. Like I want to like go make it to the industry and stuff. But like if I'm happy, then I'm happy. Like if I want to be in the industry and that makes me happy, then I want to go to the industry. But like I want to make my art where it makes me happy.
Okay.
What are your fears?
My fears?
Just got deep.
Yeah, that got real deep. I think some of my fears is like not like proving to like my parents like, because I kind of made a sacrifice of like choosing art. I think art was one of my biggest sacrifices than choosing mechanical engineering, because like for them like, oh, that's stable, like you could get somewhere with that.
Yeah,
but
but will you be happy?
Yeah, that's the thing. Like my parents wanted me to become a cop or something. Like I was like, I don't want to be a cop, you know. And I tried, and that wouldn't make me happy in the future. And I feel like art would make me happy, and I just want to like show them. And that's like another fear.
Dude,
like,
shout outs to your parents, because again, and to yourself, because I'd known you for a couple of years. I didn't just meet, you know, Amrit when we started here. And the thing is like Amrit had to go prove himself. Like his parents said, no, you want this, go prove yourself. Go to another school, go work on something else, go do something and hit that benchmark and show us that you're serious about this. And that's what he did. And then it took a lot of understanding for his parents, both mom and dad, in that process, for them to be like, you're going to a school that's not accredited, that doesn't have a degree, like WTF, you know, it's so much. And I don't think, you know, mom or dad cuss, but it was definitely one of those situations where it was like, you know, you did sacrifice a lot. So that failure is real. And, you know, again, but shout outs to them for believing in you.
Yeah. And I think that's what makes me go further and further, just them believing in me. So
cool. What about you, man? What do you see down the dusty road?
Improve as an artist. Like that's like always a thing. I think I've always been less like, there was never like an end goal for me. It was always just moving forward. So I think like that journey of just improving and getting better, wherever that happens to take me.
And is that artistic? Is that outside of art? Is that personal life? Like what is
artistic? Like I want to be a better artist. Oh, I mean, I want to be healthier.
Okay, cool.
I got you.
But I'm not. No, I'm not gonna say. But yeah, I don't know. I just want to keep getting better. Like and for me, it's I want to be better, so that way I have more to share with students. You know what I mean? Like that's just more information. I talked about this in the class. Like I try to be as transparent as possible in the classroom. So there's no information that I'm ever going to hold back. I know that sounds obvious as a teacher. It was, and like not to.
There's some truth to that.
Okay, because I mean, I've dealt with other artists who don't share their secrets because they don't want to make what makes them unique available to other people.
I think that's a conundrum in some professionals, that they have a hard time wanting to venture into teaching sometimes because they feel like they're going to teach all their Jedi traits. Yeah. And then that Jedi is going to come up and kill them, you know, Kylo Ren them or something, you know.
I'd be happy. I mean, that would make me more than happy. Like, that's what I want.
But I think that's an illegitimate fear to a certain extent, because the information's out there. It's accessible. If somebody wants it that bad enough, they're going to get it. It's like a bike lock for your bike. You know, somebody wants to steal your bike, they're going to get it. Not to say not to lock up your bike, but there's a means of getting there if they want it. And I think it's the same thing with information. So, and I think as an art teacher, you know, you do create a legacy. You know, we talk about, you know, the production value of like producing something and, hey, that's a standalone image and I can be proud of that. Well, as an art teacher, you create a legacy. You know, you're teaching people your ways, and then in a way that carries on, that information carries on, and becomes, in some instances, even, you know, the Riley method, the Christian method, you know, it becomes a thing. And I think that's really, really important.
The Christian method where you work for 45 minutes and go smoke a cigarette.
Yeah, 2 cigarettes in the back of smoking. But I do respect that about you, and I know that that's 100% truth, you know, when you say that, because you do give everything out there. Sometimes too much. Like, whoa, Christian, put it back, man. Like, pull back, bro.
This is only the second day of class.
Like, yeah, I don't need to know you like that.
I do have a problem with oversharing. I get too personal.
No, that's great.
But I think it's endearing to some students, maybe.
So what are your fears in terms of like
not getting better? I don't know. No, I mean that's not true. But like, it's always my fears. Like as you get older, the things that you grow to fear get very basic and very real. But like keeping a roof over my head, you know what I mean? It's just like stability. It's like and like the loss of stability.
That's the stuff you don't think about at like 18, 19 years old.
Yeah.
And especially if you have a good home structure. You know, it's like, dude, mom charging you rent, she's not going to kick you out. But as you get older, yeah, you think about that. You think about like, oh, I have to pay mortgage. I have to.
When I was in my
Dental insurance for the
20s,
kids.
I was like, I want to die when I'm 50.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, fuck, I'm going to live till like I'm 100.
Please.
God
Yeah.
damn. Like, I don't, not that I want to. I mean, it's just like, when people say like life is short, but it takes a long time. You know, and you got to make it through it all. So I think that stability is like really important for me. So those are my fears. It's like maintaining stability, or at least getting to a more comfortable.
And right time is relative too. Like it's crazy. It's a shout out to Eitan Zana, but we were at the workshop over the weekend, and he pulled up this one page, and it was like an 8.5 by 11 sheet, and it had the average life expectancy, which was like 80 something, and there was a box for every week and it just showed your whole life on a little page. It's like, dude, that's your life.
Yes.
What the hell are you gonna do with it? You know, and where are you at in this chart? And like, what the hell? It's crazy when you think about it like that, right? But I've been places, and I haven't traveled a lot. I went to Fiji on my honeymoon, and you know, the island life, you know, that we would say third world or whatever, is completely different. Like their concept of time is completely different. Like it's like when you're on vacation and you're like in the woods somewhere, like it feels like those days like drag on and they go on for a long time. But when you're busy, time flies. And so time is completely relative in terms of like the way you view it. But I think that's a legitimate, you know, concern and fear, and you're going to live to be 106. No doubt about that.
I'm going to plan to get hit by a bus.
Don't do that.
Eaten by bears. That's what I want to
That's the way to go out.
Yeah.
What was it? There was like a thing like a week ago where like some poacher got, stomped on by a rhino or something.
Damn.
Yeah, so
that's the
like,
way to go. See, but then a death like that, that's what you get remembered. It's not like the things you did during your life, but you get remembered by your death.
Yeah.
And maybe that's epic too.
Super epic. And I think there's two things. You don't choose, like when you come into this world, and you don't choose how you come out, typically. And so it's what you do while you're here.
Yeah.
It's that legacy that you build while you're here.
Yeah.
Cool. Rudely Poodly Doodly, what are your goals?
Mine is similar to Amrit's, where I just want to get better and improve, and then similar fears of like, I don't want all this time that I've spent on art to be wasted, because I know that it does lead somewhere. It's just if I can find the right way to slither to the goal, whatever. And then fears are wait, did I just say it? Yeah, fears of not improving, fears of dying in a car crash on the freeway.
It's real.
Randomly getting cancer.
That sucks.
Super bees.
It's kind of fucked up for me to have asked fears, because now it's a thing and we're talking about it. But like it was genuinely curious.
Yeah.
But I think that can be a good motivator too, except for the super bees.
Super bees. I saw a lot of butterflies on the way here.
Yeah. There's a lot of butterflies there, and I think your fears are butterfly. Really quick, just because we're getting ready to wrap things up, and I think you only shared your fears with me, and then my fears is disconnection with you guys. So staying connected with this community, and having something that wiped it out. So for me, I fear for my family, well-being. That's just natural. In terms of goals, it's just to continue to grow this community and education platform to reach out to more people and give them alternative means legitimately, and then just try to raise good stewards of the world in terms of my children. And then fears, fuck a clown and a spider. But that's it. So I think that's all the time that we have for today. I want to thank Christian, Amrit, Riddell, my co-host or host. I'm his co-host. And
we'll
Jordan
work on
Oblique
that
on the
exchange.
cameras. Yeah.
Shout out to
Shout outs to. Yeah.
Nice.
Thank you guys.
Thanks, guys.
Are we still recording? Or is it off?
Bye, guys.
It's been real. It's been emotional. We laughed. We cried. But now it's time for me to bid you guys adieu.
Adieu.
Je me libère de mes démons intérieurs.